Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the second shelf. It's the 1st of July, and that means it's time for my July TBR. For those of you who might be new to the channel, TBR for me means not to be read, but to be released. At the beginning of each month, I choose 4 or 5 novels that will be released in that month and that I find interesting. I always read of course, the blurb and a bit about the author, and I read the excerpt that you can get on Amazon, and if I like that, then the book might end up on my July TBR. And this time I have 4 books that will be released in July and that I thought looked interesting. And the first one, as always, is a debut novel from Zinzi Clemmons, What We Lose. I'm always interested, as you know, in finding new authors. So I always try to include at least one debut novel in the TBR of a month. Debut novels are also a bit of a risk, of course, because you can't read anything else that the author has written. So you have to take a bit of a leap of faith if you read the first 10 pages and you like it. And I did like the first 10 pages that I read from Zinzi Clemmons' novel. Zinzi Clemmons is an American writer. She lives in Los Angeles, but she was brought up in Philadelphia. Her father is a Black American and her mother is South African. So the novel is set partly in the US and partly in South Africa, and is, from what I can see from the blurb and from interviews with Zinzi Clemmons, autobiographical to some extent, because it is about the loss of a mother. Zinzi Clemmons lost her mother before she wrote the book, and it's also about identity, how the main character Tandy is struggling with her identity as well in the United States and in South Africa. I thought the prose was really beautiful, the first 10 pages I read, and I'm interested in the subject, and I have a sweet tooth for South Africa. I've lived there for a little bit, just before and after the first free election in 1994, and I love the country. So whenever I see an author writing about South Africa or coming from South Africa, I'm interested. So the first one I want to recommend, I can't, recommend is maybe a too strong a word because I haven't read it, so I can't recommend it. But the first one that I would recommend as interesting is this debut by Zinzi Clemmons. And the second novel that I think sounds interesting and will be released in July, on the 11th of July, is Elizabeth Day, The Party. Elizabeth Day is an British author, I should say. She published her debut in 2012, Scissors, Paper, Stone, about the aftermath of child abuse, which I thought was quite good. I liked. And then for some reason, I lost track of her. I didn't keep track of her. It's not her fault, because she published 2 novels after that I didn't read. But her 4th will come out in July, and that sounded really interesting. I filed it under the category crime mystery, sort of, because it's a sort of a crime theme. The party is about a party, a 40th birthday party, and the main character Martin is going with his wife to the party of his best friend's 40th birthday, and the best friend's name is Ben. Oh, I'm not really organized today. Okay, we'll try that again. And at that party something happens, and the book opens after the party, when Martin is at the police station interrogated by the police about the events that have happened at the party. We don't know at the beginning what, but something has happened, and somebody is in the hospital in a coma. And then in the course of the book, we learn about the relationship between Martin, who is from a poor, or let's say not really well-off background, and he goes to gets a scholarship for a very good school, and there he meets Ben, and Ben is from a really rich British family, royalty even, um, Lord and Lady, the parents, and Martin, yeah, seeks the friendship of Ben, and it's a bit the theme of The Talented Mr. Ripley. You know, if you've seen the movie or if you read the book by Patricia Highsmith, where the main character is trying to get into the life of rich people, almost taking over the life. So that's a similar theme in this book. I read the book already, and I really liked it. I thought it was very well written. It flows really easily, even though it has it looks back and has different points of view, something that, you know, I'm not always in favor of. But I really liked the atmosphere. I liked the way the friendship and the difficulties in the friendship between Martin and Ben were described. So I think this one is a good recommendation in the category crime mystery, sort of. So that's Elizabeth Day, The Party. And I will certainly read her other two books that I missed after her debut novel. The third book I want to include in the July TBR is historical fiction and translated fiction, translated from the German. And you know I'm German myself, at least I was born in Germany. And that is Astrid Dehe and Achim Engstler, Eichmann's Executioner. The original was published in German in 2014, but will in the English translation by Helen MacCormac and Alyson Coombes, will be published in July. Now, Astrid Dehe and Achim Engstler they're a German writing duo, and they write fiction together, which I find interesting because I write crime fiction together with somebody else. Well, you know, I find that interesting that other people do that as well. And I really liked a couple of their previous books about Kafka. I haven't read this one, Eichmann's Executioner, in German. In the German original, but I will now, and probably also read the English translation to see how the translation is done. The book is about, like the title says, Eichmann's Executioner, Shalom Nagar, who draw the short straw when the prison guards in the prison in 1962, where Eichmann was kept. One of them had to be the executioner. Eichmann was hanged, as you might know, the 1st of June 1962, and Shalom Nagar was the one who had to do the execution. Now, the book is about, or the book is set much later, decades later, when Shalom Nagar lives in Tel Aviv, and he thinks back on the events guarding Eichmann and the execution of Eichmann. And the book explores themes about our past, how our past obviously is important for how we live in the present, but it's also a past with a traumatic experience. So whether we remember correctly or not, and the book, in the book, Nagar meets somebody else who was also guarding Eichmann, and that meeting makes Nagar rethink his past and doubt whatever kind of past he has made for himself. And I find this such an interesting subject, and I'm of course also find it fascinating to read a story, a fictionalized story about the executioner of somebody like Adolf Eichmann. So this one made it into my July TBR almost immediately when I saw the translation. And obviously, again, I missed the German publication in 2014. Oh well. And the last book is, of course, science fiction, because there has to be at least one sci-fi book in my TBR. And this time I chose Eleanor Lerman, The Stargazer's Embassy, which will come out mid-July. Eleanor Lerman is an American author. She lives in New York. She was born in 1952. and she writes poetry. She's very well known for her poetry collections and short stories and sci-fi. So I came to know Eleanor Lerman through her sci-fi novels, which I really liked. And the new one, The Stargazer Embassy, sounded fascinating. It's about a woman, Julia Glazer, and the theme alien abduction. That's a theme that Eleanor Lerman always explores in one way or another in her sci-fi novels. But this time it's alien abduction with a twist, because the aliens are trying to make contact with Julia Glazer, but Julia, and they are obviously afraid of her, and Julia refuses contact. And there's also a bit of a murder mystery, because Julia's partner was murdered, and he was a psychiatrist exploring and investigating and researching alien abductees. So the premise of the book sounded fascinating, and because I like her writing and I like her sci-fi novels, the ones she's written previously, I include this one in the TBR. This book, by the way, was kindly sent to me by the publisher, so I guess I will start probably my July read with the Stargazer's Embassy. Anyway, these were my 4 books for the July TBR. I hope some of them could catch your interest. Let me know what you think, whether you want to pick up any of the books, or whether there are any other books that you plan on reading in July, whether new releases or other books. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again soon in my next video. Bye bye.